So hello and welcome. I'm Lisa, and I'm calling from the Institute for Health and Healing. And today I'll be leading a little discussion about values and their ability to guide us when we're feeling stuck. Those of you that have joined me on Fridays before know I have a general structure to sessions, one where we just take a moment to refocus ourselves here in this moment. Then we have our discussion, and then we'll do a final mindfulness breathing exercise as a nice way to kind of regulate our nervous systems at the end of the day here together. So, values. As a therapist, when people come to me, oftentimes they come in because something's happening in their life that they're not satisfied with. And overall, as human beings, we really do want to be connected to a sense of purpose. And so where values come in our everyday, and when looking at our lives, is that they can really be guideposts. They can be guideposts that tells us when we're moving in the right direction. And I want to distinguish here for a moment the difference between goals and values. So values are a lifelong direction, again, connected to, say, purpose or meaning. We can think of it in terms of what I stand for, what I find to be inspirational, and like what I'd want to be known for, right? If someone were writing an article kind of reflecting on my life, what is it that they would say about me? Whereas goals are daily actions we do in service of those values. So kind of, I think of it in a way, if we're in an ocean, the values would be a lighthouse that we're headed towards, right? And then we'd have things that we're doing along the way that help us move there, right? And I think that's an important distinction, because I think sometimes people come in and they'll say to me, you know what, Lisa, I want to be happy. And there's not really something that we can do where we say, I did it, I did that action, I've achieved happy, I'm done. Right? If we kind of think of it that way, it makes sense to say, like, no, there would be things that we kind of constantly have to do or look at. How would we define happiness, and what does that mean? And one way we could define happiness is this idea is if I'm living a life of purpose and value, that I would feel overall a sense of happiness. If I look at values, it's also important to look at this idea, is this my personal value, or is this external? Is this something I've been messaged about, like, this is important, you should value this? And one of the nice things about getting to be adults is we get to really say, what is my personal value? I grew up in this way, I hear these messages about values, but this is really what I want to prioritize. From where I stand in the clinic, an example of this could be, I need to lose weight. And if we ask people about that, well, I should. People in society give us a lot of messages. Skinny is happier, right? Skinnier is better. My doctor's telling me to do it. And so all of these are messages, but really we're not typically successful with changing a lifestyle if we don't on some level have a value to it ourselves, something that's really personal about it, right? So if we use that example, if I'm kind of wanting to lose weight, is there something about that connects to my values? For instance, I want to show up for my family, and I want them to be able to trust I'll be around. And so part of that is having health and monitoring what I can do or what I have control over to help me be a part of this family longer. Or maybe it's also showing and role modeling for my kids. These are ways to think about taking care of your body. And so I'm in line with the value of health, right? And again, this would be something that isn't we do it and it's done. Right, it's an active process where we say, well, what am I doing this week, right, about wellness? So what are goals I have there, right? And so looking at that is something we're never going to say I'm done and I'm finished, but more I'm going to move in that direction. When we're looking at values, part of what can happen is it can bring up a lot of feeling. And that's a good thing. Feelings are good indicators to ourselves about what our core values are. There's a psychologist by the name of Steve Hayes, who's one of the creators of something called ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. And in ACT, there's a lot of focus on values. And he has this quote, which I really like: "In your pain, you find your values, and in your values, you find your pain." Meaning, if I ask somebody, say, how do you think work is going, and they're really struggling, right? What we tend to find is maybe there's something about the work environment that's not congruent with their own values. Or if we're not happy in a relationship, maybe there's something in our behavior that's not congruent with our values. And I see this happen in work environments a lot, actually, where someone comes in and they say, I'm really stressed at work, and I'm not happy there. And when we look at it and we say, well, what are your top values? And if the organization doesn't match, then they're suffering, right? And that makes sense. So, and our pain is telling us, hey, here's where my value lies, and I'm not moving in that direction. So a little bit, if we're going to do this work, there needs to be a willingness to say, this might be a little uncomfortable, right? Another thing people come to me about that's really common is, I want more relationships and connection. I really value connection. Well, now during a time of a pandemic, this is something where many people are feeling maybe isolated, or that they don't have a relationship. And so if we talk about what do you value, then there's a bit where bringing up I don't have connection can be very vulnerable, right? It can be very vulnerable, and parts of ourselves might feel stressed and overwhelmed, like that's something I want, but I can't do it. And so that's even stressful, that I feel like this is a setup, like I'm on if I allow myself to connect with that value, I'm going to feel a bit like, there's going to be no way I can reach it, and so this is kind of cruel. And so with that value, one of the things we want to do is get flexible. So say, for instance, I'm noticing it's really important to me to have a relationship, and I really value intimacy. Then I'm going to have to get creative about what ways can I be moving towards that goal, even with all the constraints and barriers of, say, shelter in place. Right, and so this, I do hear people doing this a lot, where maybe say at first they say, well, I don't want to do Zoom calls, or I don't want to write letters, and I don't want to join new things, right? That there's a part of themselves saying, I don't want to do that. And then we look at, well, how do you still find yeses that align with your values? And what would that look like? And where this is all really important to me is that it gives us also a way to prioritize. So right now we have a lot of competing demands, and we might have many values. In fact, when I have people kind of do a values exploration, it's not uncommon that people, have these value cards, and they might have like 15 or 20 in front of them. So one of the first things we do is, how do we say, what are your top 3 that you're going to focus on? And maybe even looking into domains, right? So kind of looking at what's a value in relationships I really want to move towards, and what's a value in career in my career. And then setting goals related to those values. And then this is where we can help us feel like we're getting unstuck, right? Because we have something very concrete that we can do towards that value. It's also a way of helping us kind of reframe what's successful, right? So if being at work, I'm really interested in having reliability, right? I might look at, in what ways was I successful in being reliable? And maybe that meant I set a boundary that was hard, or I had a conversation that was hard, or that even though I was tired and fatigued, I didn't let my mood say, no, you're not going to do that, and instead I did it anyways. And so I can have a sense that I have control over things, and that I'm moving towards something that's important to me. And so although I didn't get all the things done in my day, I can look and say, well, how did I do if I assess myself based on that goal? Also in relationships, right? Kind of looking at what's a value I have. So if I really value being trustworthy, again, looking at what are things that I can do in my day that help me with being trustworthy, that have people have a sense that I do what I say and I say what I mean, right? And just even working on communication might mean, hey, maybe there's not anything that I have to do extra out of the ordinary, except for that maybe I have an urge not to have a discussion or to back out on a commitment I made. And then I say, hey, you know what? I have a value of being trusting. So with that, I want to just invite you to think about in your own lives, what would you say are your top values? What would you say are things that are really meaningful to you? And to think about, is there a way that over the weekend you can do something towards that value? You know, if you have a value of, say, connection and intimacy, is there something that you can do related to that? And so you have a lot of choices for the weekend. Maybe, you know, some are habits. Well, I'll just, you know, kind of watch this Netflix show right now. But can I say, hey, just watching the Netflix show, although it feels good in the moment, is it helping me move towards this greater purpose? And not that there's anything wrong with Netflix, right? But that sometimes we make these choices in a given day out of habit. We're not really being thoughtful about whether or not that habit is moving us to where we want to go. And so it's really just a lens to help empower ourselves and to be very compassionate, you know, that there's always going to be kind of barriers or things that come up, and we're going to get flexible. And this is the thing about a goal being something we shoot towards, is that, you know, if in a week I really struggled with something, I noticed the barriers, and I say, all right, I'm gonna try this again, right? What are things I can get support with these barriers, whether it be not listening to thoughts I have, or getting, you know, distracted by feelings that come up when I'm going to do things, right? Or is it that in this week, logistically, it, you know, just wasn't possible? And so how do we say, like, okay, well, because this is an ongoing thing, then there's always another try that I can do to do this. And so being very compassionate about that, as opposed to when we focus on goals that, you know, aren't really reflecting our reality, aren't really reflecting things that are happening in the moment, and aren't really maybe allowing us to be flexible about how we move forward. For the last part of our time together, I was just going to lead you in a bit of mindfulness. We've been talking here a lot about the value of mindfulness, and then today I'm really offering it as a way to support you and connecting with yourself. If we think about, you know, according to this topic of values, right, if I'm really going to know what my values are, I would argue, need to be a space where we're dropping into our internal, noticing messages, and being willing to come into contact with what is, right? So if I'm having a hard day, taking that time to say, what is this about? What doesn't feel right? And is there something that I can glean or learn from that in a non-judgmental way, just kind of observing, yeah, this is how it feels right now. So this skill can be applied anytime during the day, right? Anytime during your week where you're noticing sensation, experience, and it might be helpful in informing you about value, right? Again, going back to, in your pain, you find your values, and in your values, you find your pain. So at this time, if you could I want to invite you to just settle into your chair, maybe making yourself a little bit more comfortable. Noticing how your shoulders are, and so if they've rolled in, perhaps allowing them to roll slightly back. Opening your chest up a little bit. Allowing breath to come in and out. Noticing how it simply feels to be here right now. Where is your body making contact with your chair? Knowing your mind will undoubtedly be drawn to many other places, the past, the future. We're going to do our best to just simply bring it right back to really focusing, paying attention on the sensation of our chair. Noticing how the floor feels against your feet. Maybe even trying to draw your focus to what points of your foot are making contact where. And what sensations do you notice? Using our senses to ground us right here in this moment. Perhaps you notice a texture of a fabric, feeling of a shoe. And now I invite you to simply notice your breath without changing or altering it. So in your next breath, simply following it. Where does it go? When you're inhaling, for instance, does it go through your nose? Can you notice how it feels? Some people may even notice a temperature change. Can you follow it down into your chest? And does it stay there? Or does it go deeper into the belly? And again, just following the breath all the way until we follow it to our exhale. If thoughts are coming up, that's okay. We don't wrestle them or fight them. So there you are, thought, and we just return back to the practice. And now I invite you in your own pace to spend time scanning your body. And scanning your body for any sensation that you feel. Not necessarily labeling it all good or bad, but just that it is. Go ahead and just notice if there's any sensations, tensions. Simply observing and describing with a non-judgmental lens. And now from here, just taking a nice inhale in through your nose, seeing if you can send it all the way down into your belly, feeling your belly rise, and exhaling fully from your mouth. And with this breath, seeing if we can invite just a little bit more lengthening of the breath. So inhaling in, sending breath to our belly, and exhaling fully out. And now for the final part, I just invite you to place your hand upon your chest, knowing that we're wired for touch and comforting. And using this as a way in this moment to invite a sense of grounding, a sense of connection, of nurturance. Knowing that whatever you experience right now in your body, it is contained. And one final deep breath of your own pace and style. And if you can just wiggle your body, stretch your body, allow yourself to slowly move back into the workday. I want to thank everyone for being on the call today. I hope that you give yourself um, some praise for committing and making time to be on the call, for leaving space to think about what's important to you and how you might move your life to focus on what's important to you. I'm wishing everyone moments of calm over the weekend, and I thank you so much for joining me.